Hi, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
This is our final week for September's book of the month, Good Duke
Yeah.
Gone Wild by Bethany Bennett. I love this cover. So fun.
Chapter,
So,
chapter 21.
yes,
Here we go.
here we go. So, Dorian and his mother are at another ball, which he hates. He would rather be spending all his time with Caroline if he could.
He
Um,
told his mom he wanted to pump the brakes on this whole like find a wife
mhm.
campaign. And she's like, sure, sure, but there's new people
Sure, sure.
that just came to town. So I have a list of
Yep.
ones you need to meet. And
Yep.
he's just kind of like, okay.
Ugh.
I did
And so
say no
he's
thank you though.
Yeah, no, thank you though. So he's been thinking about they've been finding more letters, one of which was actually written by his wife to her lover. Not sure why she still had that one, but he's like, it was full of lies about him. So he's like, clearly this Sherman person wasn't the only one lying, though he's not sure why.
He
And of course, he can't
and
ask
like
her.
he's been wondering like what it is that he did, and he and like when la last week when Caro
Right.
woke up in his arm, or like when she told him he snored and he was
Yeah.
like, do
Yeah. He didn't know.
he did say like, oh well, actually my wife never complained
Never said anything.
about
Yeah.
anything, like there was nothing I did that was a topic of
And he
discussion.
never really thought about that until he thought about, like, not only did she not tell me I snored, she never complained about anything. And clearly nobody is 100% happy all the time. So she was not being honest with him ever.
So but the things that he saw in this letter, and this is when he reads it, he's just kind of like, I mean, I know that like there's no way that she was happy with every single thing I did all the time, 100% for like
Right.
all the years we were together.
Yeah.
But the things that are in this letter
Are
are
not.
not true. Like they're not
Right.
things I did.
Yeah.
So that is also like, I don't know. Like I think he's feeling ways because he's just like, okay,
And he
so
can't
I
ask
know.
her or do anything about it. So it's
Yeah.
frustrating, I'm sure. This woman comes up and kind of accosts him at this ball and says, Blanche was right, wasn't she? And he's like, what? Like he does not understand what this lady is talking about, and he wants her to
And
get away
she's
from him
like rubbing
immediately.
up on him.
Yeah,
Like at first he thinks she's like bumping into him, but
yeah.
no, she's like
Rubbing up on his groin, like fully in the middle of the
like
ballroom.
groping him in the ball. And
Yeah,
he's
and he
just
is
like,
like, get away from me. And so that confuses him, but of course I'm like, oh no, this is not good. Like I'm like red alert like going off in my head, right?
yeah, because
So
Caro had been kind of like, I mean, he was just amused. Like obviously I didn't put like any details that people would
identifying
recognize,
stuff. Yeah.
but
Maybe she's wrong about that. And in fact, she was wondering if she was wrong about that. She's like, "Oh, I really hope I took everything out of there that I like, that identified him." So yeah, like you said, his mom is pointing out prospects and he's not interested. And he has a funny moment with this footman.
he thinks about how Caro told him that like
Servants are
the
people.
the servants know that they're people. Also, they know everything that's going on in here,
Yes.
and so he does ask. Like the footman comes with a tray of champagne, and he's like, "Question for you," and the guy's like, "What? Like
Right.
you are speaking to me? What's
Right.
happened?"
Like I'm not just the furniture. You acknowledge that I exist. Yeah. And he asks him about, he's like, my mother once introduced me to this one and this one. Which one do you think is, is the best one, basically?
It's like this widow and this other blonde lady, and he's just
this lady visits the like the back porch a lot with random people. So maybe this widow is nice though. Like I like her. You should talk to her.
and he's like, "But if I had to pick, actually, I'd pick this redhead over here." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that," like, and he's like, "Yeah, she's really actually she's pretty like kind, and she's like
Yeah.
he tells her this man knows the lay of the land, and
Yes, of course.
he does let the Duke know. But his mom is like,
She's like, do
"You
you know
know
him?
that guy?"
He's like, no.
She's like, "You seem very
She does not
familiar."
understand. Yeah, it's really funny. And so then he asks his mom, he's like, what's more important to you ultimately? Like me being happy and then eventually possibly having kids, or like marrying well just to have an heir? Like which one what's your priority, basically? Because he's trying to get a feeling for that.
And she does one of those like, why not both? And
Right.
he's
And
like,
of course
okay,
she knows
no.
it's about Caro, but he's like, no, this is all hypothetical, whatever. And she's like, mm-hmm. And so, they agree to disagree for the moment, basically. And she walks off to hang out with her friends, and he goes to find Oliver. And they go
But
into the
she
card
obviously
room.
like wants him to be like, you get the feeling that like she wants him to be happy, but within the
Scope of what she wants.
scope of, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So she's,
Um,
I feel like she's like, I'm giving you options, aren't I? Like
right.
it's
Like I
kind
didn't
of
just
that
pick one.
situation.
Like I'm letting you pick from my small list of options. Yeah. So he finds Oliver. They go into the card room to find Lord Bixby. And he turns out to be not bad, like not what they were expecting, unlike his
He does. They
cousin.
have this like kind of like coded conversation where he's just like, "Don't we all have somebody in the family that we wish like
Wish wasn't. Yeah.
wasn't there?" Um, but also like he's playing cards with his wife, I guess, who seems like they seem like they're well
Oh, the
matched.
other couple is like a
The
husband
other
and wife, and then
couple,
he's there with another guy who nobody likes. And
but
the
the
wife is making that clear too, which is funny.
yeah, but she also asked a couple of like questions that Dorian's like, I'm not sure what she's talking about. But then
Right.
they move on and like play their game and
Yeah.
it's
And also
fine
Bixby does offer to meet him privately to give him, he's like, I do have information for you if you want to meet with
if you
me
want.
at another time, basically. And so Caroline is confronted by Hattie, who is very worried about her, both like physically and emotionally. Like she's like, I thought you were just like getting this out of your system, but like you've been gone every night. We've been covering for you. Like, are you even safe getting to his house? Like you're walking around here in the dark. Like, what are you doing? And
And
she's like,
she's
no, like I'm safe. He always sends a, carriage for me, etc. And she's like, also emotionally, like, too late. Like that ship has sailed. Like we're you
she's like,
know,
I've not told him, but like I'm
but
all
like
in.
it's too late for all that. Yeah.
The other
And
thing that
so
she's worried about Hattie is though, is like she tells her like we live in this neighborhood that's fine in the daytime, but probably shouldn't be walking around at night.
right.
However, she's like, if people around here think that you are like not respectable, it's gonna be real bad.
Well, right,
She's
like
like,
if they
you've
find
got
out you're fucking a duke for one thing, they're gonna judge you. Just period. Second of all, if they think you're like open for business, the way they treat you is gonna be different also. Like
well, and
regardless
she's
of
like,
the fact
every
that he's a
man
duke.
around here is gonna think that you're available. Is what like
Right.
she said, if they don't think that you're, if they think that you're not respectable, then they are going to think that they
Right.
can descend
Try
upon
something.
you.
Right.
And she's just like, it's not. And Caro has the thought like, is this because of what happened to her?
Right. And they don't
But
really fully know
she
what
always shuts
happened
it
to her.
down.
Yeah, she won't even talk about it. So then Connie comes in crying, saying that her fiance is probably going to miss their wedding day. He had to go to the coast to meet some shipment. He's like a cloth merchant, and like they know that he has to deal with some like smuggling and stuff like that because of the war. Like that's all, like nobody's like surprised
Surprised.
by this.
But it
But
feels extra shady.
it does. And also like who can't say when they're going to be back? Like he's going to miss his own wedding for the shipment. Like something is weird, right? And they might have to postpone. And so they're all kind of comforting each other
They're like, well, if
in
you
this
cancel it
moment.
now, like it's still 2 weeks out. We can like see if the butcher, because they've put deposits down to do like the wedding breakfast and all these
Right.
things.
Yeah,
And so she's like, we can postpone like for
push that.
another date or try to
Yeah,
figure out. We still have enough time. And she's kind of like, no, but he said he might come back. So like
right. So she's not sure what to do about it, basically, but she's upset. So in the Duke's office, with Caro, his mom comes in and wants to know what has him so distracted. And so he finally tells her about Juliet's affair, which she already suspected but couldn't prove and therefore didn't say anything,
didn't say
basically.
anything.
And she also tells them something they didn't know, which is that it's Juliet's cousin, Timothy, who he hates from the very beginning of this book,
Well,
who
he'd been
introduced
like,
her to Sherman. And he's
yeah,
like, wait, what? Because that was one of his many questions was like, how did this guy even meet my wife to get his claws into her, basically? Because of
yeah.
course, back then you couldn't just like show up at a fancy party. Like you have to be introduced by someone in the work
But
in
you're
that
not supposed to
world.
be talking to people unless you're introduced to them. Like you
Right.
don't talk to a stranger. And Juliet is the Duchess. She's not going to be talking to some rando who's like hanging around.
Right.
So, and as we now know, he wasn't even good looking or charming or anything.
Or anything.
So
Yeah.
there's not like
So it's like, how
anybody.
did this even start? And so turns out her dastardly cousin is the one who introduced them.
Yeah, and this cousin
So
has
he's
been
clearly up
like,
to this in his neck, up to his
yeah,
neck in this too. Yeah.
he's been like kind of semi-black, not fully blackmailing, but kind of like
Yeah. Well,
he,
he implies back in that in the first week we talked about, he's like, because I guess back then it's like when you take on a wife, you take on her whole family, and the only person left in her family is this cousin. And so if it looks like he's not like supporting his dead wife's family, like that will look bad on him, basically. And
yeah,
he's used that to his advantage all these years, even now she's been dead for 5 years. Um, so his mom, of course, is worried about the scandal of exposing all of this. And he's like, I don't care about that at this point. Like, I do not care. I want to find out what happened. And also,
and
like,
also if
take
this
people to
suit is,
justice if need be. Because
yeah,
they're out probably doing this to
and
other
they're
people
harming
right
other
now.
people. Yeah,
Yeah. And so, which of course is true, because a guy like that never is going to stop. Like, as long as he's successful, he's just going to keep doing what he's doing. Like, he's for
yeah.
sure out there doing it to somebody else right now. Um,
And yeah,
and
the mom obviously is thinking more about their reputation and their name
yeah,
and their title. But he obviously has become more a man of the people. So he's kind
right.
of like,
Well, and at this point, he's not willing to sacrifice what might be happening to other people if he can stop it just because of his reputation. Because
yeah,
ultimately, it's like the scandal, it's like he's a fucking duke. Like it doesn't matter. Like, and he
yeah,
knows
yeah.
that.
And it's like
So,
over, right? Like his wife
yeah.
died. It's not like there's
Right. It's not
nothing
like an
current.
ongoing situation. Right, exactly. So, um the next day, Dorian gets a letter from the crown requesting that he return to diplomatic service. And he is like surprised. He doesn't really want to, though he doesn't really have a reason not to, other than the fact that he is supposed to be trying to get married and have an heir, which is obviously important to the crown as well because of his position.
Yeah.
But like he also knows that Prinny, as they called the Prince Regent, could be very um mean and punitive when you didn't do something
What he
he
wanted
wants
to
you to
do.
do. So he's worried about if he does say no, like what are the repercussions for that? And then Gerard comes to see him and he details with receipts about Juliet's funding of this school that, of course, doesn't exist, and Timothy's shady behavior both before and after her death. Um, and ways that Dorian, like all the different options Dorian has for cutting Timothy off legally without it like reflecting poorly on him.
Yeah. It's really funny because Dorian keeps like, oh, could we like throw him off a cliff? And he's just like, as your solicitor, I
I can't
would like
suggest
to
that.
advise that you should not like
Definitely don't
murder
do that.
anyone. Which is really it was to me, it like tickled me the way that
Yes, it
he
was
was
very funny.
like,
And so as Gerard is about to leave, Dorian asks him about his friendship with Caroline. And Gerard is like, "Oh, you guys have gotten close since she's been here." And he's like, "Yeah, we have." And so Gerard admits that he proposed and she declined. And the Duke admits that he's in love with her. And he's like, "Oh, wow, that's the first time I've said that out loud or admitted it to anyone."
and
And
he's
Gerard is
like,
like,
you didn't even tell her yet.
"Right,
Why
like,
are
why
you
are you
talking to
telling
me?
me?" But Gerard basically admits about his relationship with Leo and why, like, he proposed to her and what he thought that that could do for him and for her.
And
Um,
this is the line of questioning that Dorian's bringing up because he had like an inkling that maybe this was the case that this guy
yeah.
and he's trying to figure out like does she have options that are better than him?
Right,
Like
like, if
he
this man
kind
is in
of
love with her and he would be better for her life that she wants, like, could I let her go to that situation,
yeah
like, and feel
because
okay about it?
at this point he's very like into Caro, but also he is aware that like the things that he's bringing to the table are not really things that she wants, and that's a
She
thing
doesn't
that
care, not
that
only does she not care about his money, but she doesn't like being the focus of people's attention, so being a duchess is not a
or
thing she would
having
ever aspire to.
expectations, right? That she has to act a certain way or be a certain way. She grew up as a vicar's daughter, and she had told him, like specifically, that was the thing that she disliked the most about that.
Everyone looking at her, waiting for her to fail, basically. And so as they're talking, he decides to offer Gerard financial backing to start his own firm in London so that he doesn't have to deal with these higher ups who like want him to be married and, live a life that is not what he wants. And
And also then he can be like his own personal like
right, his own
it's
personal
great.
lawyer, but it also kind of solidifies in Dorian's mind that he loves Caro. He doesn't care like if people don't like him marrying her. Like he's not concerned about that at all at this point. Um and he's sort of inspired by like Gerard living the life he wants to live and being able to do so, and he's like, maybe I could do that too.
Mm-hmm. And
So
he is kind of like, I'll help you. We'll all live our happy
we'll all
lives.
help each other. Yeah. So the cousins know that one of the men who's using the bookshop's mail service is having an affair. And so they're discussing like, what do we do? Do we do something? What do we do? Like, do we accidentally give the letter that's meant for his mistress to his wife? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what are we prepared to do in this situation, basically?
Yeah. They're like, we do not approve. However, like it's
Right.
like a misuse of their services in
Right.
their
So they're like,
mind.
can we do something? What should we do? And it gives Caro the idea that maybe Sherman is using a similar setup at another shop in order to woo all these women with his fake letters.
Yeah.
And so she sets Connie and Hattie on it while she goes to finish up the library. It's like the last day, they're moving all the books out and everything. The butler has him in there to help her with the crates and all that. And she goes to his office to tell him that she's done. And they're talking, they like mess around, and he says that they have things to discuss and asks her to dinner the next night, and she agrees. And so Dorian has his meeting with Bixby, and he gets all the info about Sherman. He's been a thorn in Bixby's side from birth, basically. He
Before they start talking, he is very like, let's make a deal that we're not gonna, because it turns out that Bixby like has these sisters that he's trying to like
three
fund,
sisters, I think.
and he, they've been like economizing. He's kind of like, we're not broke, but yet all their like paintings from the wall have obviously been removed, and like so clearly, and so he trades in secrets and information, and Dorian's just kind of like, you're gonna forget that you know anything that
Right.
we have just discussed. Like, I will not be traded with.
Well, and in his head, he's like, how different is this from what your cousin's doing? But Bixby's like, in my opinion, like, I don't want anybody's money. All I want is my sisters to be set up for a good life. And this is the way I'm doing that. And I would never make it about money. Like that's what sets me apart from him. And
He's
I'm
like,
fine with
that's
that,
vulgar.
basically. Yeah,
But he
exactly.
is, it's almost like, I would do anything for my family though. And if
Right.
this is what I have to do, then that's what I'm doing. And
Right.
Dorian in his head is like, even if I have to send this guy to jail, I'll make sure his sisters are okay because
Right.
that's fair.
So he tells him everything that he knows. And after their discussion, Bixby asks Dorian if it's true that the latest Blanche book is about him. And he's
He's
like,
like,
what?
are you talking
And then in
about?
his head, he's like, oh shit, I haven't read that one yet. Like he started to read it that night he got drunk and like imagined talking to his wife, but he hasn't picked it back up again.
I found that very relatable. I start a
Yes.
book, and if I put it down, who knows when I'll come back.
Yes.
So
So and again, I'm like, oh no, this is bad. So Caro and her cousins found the mail account for Sherman. It's at another bookshop across town. They've
she
set a
doesn't want
trap
to tell him anything yet because she wants to make sure, like she doesn't want to say anything until they know that they
that
have
they
a
have
thing to
him.
say.
Yeah.
But she also has been thinking about, like, she needs to tell him
About Blanche.
about Blanche because she's like, I like, if I'm willing to like plot a kidnapping for him, probably I should tell him who
About
I
my
am.
alter ego. Yeah. So they've set a trap for tomorrow. They've like left a note for him to meet them, and they're hoping that he's going to show up. Dorian talks to his mom about proposing to Caroline.
He
She
has a
puts up a
ring and
fuss, of
everything. It's so
course,
sweet.
but she finally realizes he's not going to change his mind. She's like, you have a look on your face like your father used to get when he could not be swayed. So like, I get it. Like, I can't talk you out of it, but like, I still don't like it, basically.
He does realize that she's scared too. Like he sees
Yeah.
like a micro expression on her face and is like, "Mm." And he thinks to himself, like, I wonder if she's just scared that like the one thing that like kept her going after his dad died is gonna be gone and she won't have anything then. So he is he's
Well,
very
and
generous in his assessment of the
yeah.
situation.
And I can't remember how much or if we talked about it at all, but basically his dad died really young, and so did his grandfather, and it's basically expected by his mom that this might happen to him too, which is why she's so like, "Get married, have an heir." Like, it's very because like, you could drop dead in 2 weeks. Like, that's how she's been feeling.
Well, then
And
like the
oh, he's
dad died at
good.
a certain age and it's like she's counting down like he's also going to like expire at that
Right.
moment
Well, and in this moment, he kinda says to her, like, "If I am gonna drop dead in a year, I would rather be
for the
happy."
time I
You
have
know what I
left
mean?
with.
Like, for the time I have left, instead of marrying for duty just to have an heir. Like, if all I have left is a year, I wanna spend it with her. Like, I'm not changing my mind, you know?
Yeah. Also,
So
my
she's like
goodness, what if he doesn't die and now he's stuck with this like
exactly,
what
with
in
a
the
woman he
world?
doesn't care anything about just so he could have a kid. So, his mom is like, "Fine, clearly you've made up your mind, like, moving on." So she tells him she read the book, and she thinks that there's something to all this talk about it being about him, and that they need to get the author to, like, write a letter
Retract.
for the newspaper basically explaining that, like, "No, it's not about him, like, it's fictional, etcetera." And that he had no involvement in, like, the writing of it or whatever.
The making of this book. It's
Right.
funny because she is real I mean, because in true, like, Dowager Duchess fashion, I guess, she
Yeah.
is real snooty about it, and she's kind of like, "This like, the character in this book is like a miscreant, and really it's because it's, like, on page sex
Vulgar
tricks,
things that he
things that he
does and
does."
what yeah, mhm.
So she is just like, "You can't be associated with this," and
Like, "We need to get this taken care of immediately." And he's, like, not thinking it could be that bad, but, like, the fact that his mom's freaking out is making him, like, worry about it too.
but the mom does say, like, "Well, your bookstore that you love, they were able to get the only signed copy,
Which I
so."
have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so she's like, "So, definitely we could talk to them and they could, like they
Contact
have
the
some
publisher
kind of
again.
in and they can contact the publisher and
Right.
make it
Uh,
clear that you're not the one."
right. Um, so Sherman took the bait, they are gonna meet him that night. Meanwhile, Dorian and his mom show up at the bookshop to ask about Blanche's latest book and its resemblance to him, etcetera, and
Very
his mother
serious expressions on their faces,
yeah,
like,
and
both of
she's
them
like,
look real
"Oh, no."
stern,
He's got
and
the, like,
she's
cold ducal face on that Oliver, his friend, commented on back in the beginning, like, "That's the face you get when you're, like, anxious or you don't know what to do. You, like, put on this, like, the cold duke demeanor," and she hasn't
mhm,
seen that in a while, and she's, like, concerned. Um, and so his mother, is running her mouth about being horrified about the book, etcetera, and he's clearly uneasy at the idea of people reading this and thinking it's about him, but he
yeah.
says, uh, he's uneasy about people reading a dirty book, quote unquote, and thinking it's about him, and in that moment, she's thinking to herself, like, back at the Frost Fair, when Oliver commented about the books being dirty, he, like, set him straight and was like, "That's not all they're about, like, she's a great writer, there's the story, the characters, etcetera," and, like, really stood up for her books, and she's, like, admits to herself she thinks she fell in love with him a little bit in that moment, and in this moment, hearing him call them
Spoiler.
dirty, the walls on her heart just come back up
Yeah.
immediately. She is like, "No, we're not doing this." And so, um
So we should mention that as this is happening, Caro is like, "Ooh, there's people in here," and there are people in there who are, like, coming closer and like, "Oh, hang
oh,
out
yeah,
by
they're
the
all
window."
eavesdropping.
Then
They
also
all wanna know
new
what's going
people
on.
come in, some of them look very fancy, so she's noticing, like,
This is gonna be a
their
thing.
surroundings.
Yeah. So, at this point, she's like, "I love him, and I can't let him do this, like, I have to be true to myself." And so, and at that point, his mother is like, if the author won't, post a notice, etcetera, like, we'll have to sue her. And, of course, that would ruin Caroline, just because the way the laws were back then, like, she would have to prove that she didn't do him harm,
And
rather
you
than him
can't
having
prove
to prove that he was harmed, and so she's like, That can't happen." And so she admits right there in the middle of the store in front of all these people that she is Blanche, And she's like, I love you, but like, I have to take care of myself, basically. Like, I have to love myself more. And so she's like, I will print, I'll send something to the papers saying what you want because it's true. You were not involved. I didn't know
Like
you
I
then.
didn't know you at the
Like,
time.
and I'm sorry that I put you under scrutiny this way. Like, I know you don't like that. And that was never what I wanted for you. And then she walks away. And it's heartbreaking.
And he, like, I mean, I think for both of them, she's walking away from, a thing that was like almost a fantasy. Like it was too good to be true.
From the
And
beginning. Yeah.
he is like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like he
Because
doesn't
he's like
even,
blindsided by this secret identity, but also like her ending their relationship, and he doesn't understand like how everything went so wrong so fast. So she and her cousins decide that night to go through with the Sherman plan because he did reply and he is planning to meet them, and they don't want to let that chance go.
yeah,
Because not even for the Duke, but because of what we talked about before, with like they want to make sure that nobody else is going to get harmed by him. And the only way to do that is to stop him. And so this afternoon, she wrote a note to Dorian telling him where and when to meet, but not why. So she's not sure if he's even going to show up. Um, but they get there, they meet with Sherman, they immediately put a bag over his head and tie him to a chair because it's like the only way that they're going to be safe. They don't want him to know who they are, obviously.
yeah.
And so Dorian does in fact show up,
He
and
is
he's not
gross.
sure what he's
Like
looking at.
yeah, not Dorian's gross, but Sherman's gross. Like he keeps
Yes.
being like, "Ooh, the one with the tits," and I'm
Yeah.
just like, "Sir, well,"
So gross.
but
And
yeah,
and exactly what you would picture for like a man who does this like on the regular. So Dorian is like, what is happening here? And so she's like, well, this is Sherman. Like, we have him here so you can ask him any questions you want to know. And he's like, I don't need anything from him. Like, what's he gonna tell me that I don't already know? Also, he's a liar. So like I don't care what he thinks,
yeah.
basically.
Well, he said it's interesting because he is like, yes, I thought that I needed to find out from him things, but now that I'm here, I realize that like he doesn't know
He doesn't
anything,
know. And he
and the
wouldn't tell me if he
relationship,
did.
well, and like the relationship that I was in is not a relationship I'm in now.
Right.
And whatever mistakes he said, like whatever mistakes I make that my then are not the mistakes I'm making now. Like I'm making brand new terrible mistakes.
Brand new terrible mistakes.
Um,
Even though I don't know that he even knows for sure what they are.
no, but he does say that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, sad.
And so basically he's like, I care more about you being safe, y'all being safe out of here than I do about talking to him. So he's like, you guys go, like, and we'll take care of this. So he tells Sherman, he's like, we now have a mountain of evidence against you with my solicitor. If I ever hear your name again related to another woman in this situation, like, you will wish I hadn't. Basically, like,
He's like, I'll publish it. He says to him that there's like a line of men and powerful men that he has
wronged.
who would now have incentive to to come after him, and he
Yes.
is like stealing from people in this way is a hanging offense,
Yes.
and
Fraud and theft. Yeah. Hmm.
he's like, I will publish all the evidence in the newspaper so all these people can come after you.
Yeah. Or
um
you can leave here and we never hear about you again. And so they all leave. He drags him out into the alley, like still with his head covered, and he sees the
he
girls.
tells the bookseller, he's like, here's some money in case I damage your chair. I was
Yeah,
like,
it's so funny. And so then he gets all the cousins get into a cab and go, and then he kind of like sort of unties the guy. Like, so it's gonna take him a minute to like get and besides that, at that point, Sherman's like, I know who you are. Like, I know your voice. Like, even though I can't see you, but I know it's you, Duke, kind of a thing. And he's like, that's fine. I don't need to hide from you. Like, you got nothing on me.
he's like,
Basically,
you're the
like,
one who needs to hide, you stole from
right.
me. Like, what is
Yeah.
it?
So, and then he leaves too. So in the morning, they arrive at the church for Connie's wedding. Her fiance did return like 2 days prior, so the wedding is on. Everything is as it should be, except for no, it isn't, because she's clearly miserable and they don't know what to do. So they kind of have a little huddle up, and they're like,
What's going
what are
on?
you doing? Like, and of course her first thing is like, well, everyone knows we're supposed to get married. And they're like, who
Who cares?
fucking cares? Like, that's not worth tying yourself to this man who you clearly don't want to marry anymore. Like, they had a big fight, and I think we kind of glossed over it before, but basically he kind of implied that he wanted her to be more like her twin sister, who is like your typical
Not
housewife, home with
implied.
the
He
kids
said
and happy about it. Like, that's what she wanted for her life. And she's like, that isn't what I want. And I don't know why I can't just be happy with that, but like I won't be. And the fact that he wants to change me is obviously a big
also
problem.
he was really like rude and a jerk and like hurt you before he left. And
Yes.
part of what he said was that, but also, you know, like she's just like, I don't know. Like she saw a side of him that she didn't like. And
Yes.
then the fact that he was counting on her like turning into like a
Changing.
dutiful housewife as soon as they
Yes.
got married, and she was like, what do you mean? It's
With
not.
like no dreams of her own and no like questions for him about his activities or whatever. And so she realizes she can't marry him. Um, and she announces it to the room basically, and then the cousins all leave together and go
Yeah,
home and like
it's cute
comfort
because
her.
they're like, if you want, we can like make you disappear and we'll deal with this. And she's just like, nah.
No.
she's,
Like she's no, she's
she's
like
just
now
like,
that
hello, friends, we're not
well,
getting married.
and they kind of talked about this because she's a very decisive person and like she knows what she wants and what she doesn't want. That's why she's split between so many men because she, as soon as she doesn't like something, she's out. And so that's why they're like, this time she's acting all finicky and they're like, this is so unlike you. Like, what is the deal? Do you want to marry him or not? Like, decide, you know? And once she decides, then she's fine with saying so. It's like she couldn't, she was like in this weird limbo that she didn't know how to get out
Yeah,
of.
I think that the whole situation made her question if like what she wanted from her life was okay. You know, like I think she was just like, I don't know, is it wrong that I
Yeah.
don't that this
Want to
isn't
be
the
like
life
my
I want?
sister? Yeah.
And yeah, so it's nice that she got that clarity before she
Yeah.
walked down that aisle. Ooh.
So a week later, there's an announcement in the paper from Blanche. Dorian's like, I shouldn't be surprised because Caro always does what she says she's going to do, but also he feels bad that she had to do it, and he hates like seeing it in the paper because
Also,
it's almost like
he's
a
kind of
final
like,
goodbye.
he's just like, I was not gonna ever sue her. Like that wasn't
Right.
a thing. Like as soon as, but he didn't have, he was fully blindsided by the situation,
Yes.
and he's kind of hurt that like he didn't get an opportunity to like get his feet under him or say
Right. She
anything
just
or make.
walked without giving him a chance to even like say anything about everything that she revealed. He still loves her, of course, and he doesn't know what to do at this point. So he thinks
He
about
does.
buying a cottage for her, but Gerard lets him know she has already bought it for herself. And then he's like, well, shit, there goes my like grand gesture, basically. Which honestly, like,
That
I
made
wanted
me
to be like,
giddy. I
hello,
was
you already offered that. And she said no. Like, that is not it.
I mean, I think it would be different, I think, if he bought it for her with like no, they're not together,
No
there's no
expectations.
expectations.
Yeah, that's true. It's
But
not like a mistress thing. It's like just because he wants her to have it thing. But
but
so
at the same time, if he thinks he's gonna try again, that's
right.
and it just was funny because Gerard was so like circumspect. Like he's
Oh,
kind
and
of
he's like,
like,
because yeah, he
I
couldn't get
can't
anything
tell
out of
you.
him. And finally he's like, okay, cross-examine me. Like put on your lawyer hat, start asking me questions so I can
And
like
he's
work this
like,
out
I'm
for
a
myself.
solicitor, not a barrister.
Yeah.
He's like,
And
I
he's
don't
like
go to court.
semantics. So
Ah,
he starts asking him questions. Um, and they all kind of lead to the same place. It's like what can he give her that nobody else can? And it's not a house. Like that's,
yeah.
like I'll give you a hint, it's not a house, kind of a thing. So Dorian prints an apology letter in the paper to Blanche. He doesn't name her, he names Blanche. Basically begs for her forgiveness and apologizes and asks her to meet him where they first met at like 8 p.m. on a certain day. So the cousins understand it for what it really is, which is a proposal. Like he talks
Yeah, I
about
would say,
like,
friends, you need to read it because where her
yeah,
letter was very carefully phrased to be truthful and yet to like absolve him of any like complicity in whatever was going on with that book.
right.
His was not careful and but also very sweet. Like it was so
Very
much of
heartfelt,
like,
very
yeah,
open and honest. And they're like, this man is proposing to you. Like that's what he wants. It's very clear from this letter. And so what are you going to do? And so
she
she,
also says that it was interesting that she felt like he was giving her a taste of like the scrutiny that would happen if she was a
because, and that's the
duchess
thing, he says,
without putting
she
her
says
in
that
the
to her
cross.
cousin, and they're like, oh, so he's being a prick? Like, and they're like, and she's like, well, no, he's trying to like guard me from a thing while still
Showing me what it
showing
is.
me that this is how it is. This is how it will be. Like, you can't be anonymous, but we can protect each other, kind of. Um, and so ultimately, as they're talking it out, she's like, should public speculation or really anything else mean more than how I feel about him?
Yeah.
And so she does, of course, decide to meet him at the prescribed time, and they talk things through and admit their love for each other. And
He kind of leads off being kind of like, I got called back into the service, and she's like, so this is a goodbye? Like, why'd you call me here?
yeah,
And so then he does explain, but it's really sweet that but
well, and he kind of said
he
like
wants to like lay all his cards out on the table so
everything.
she
And he also doesn't want her to feel responsible, like that he's running off because she turned him
if
down or
she
whatever.
says
Like,
no, yeah. If she says no, she doesn't want him to hear. He does not want her to hear that he like went off to the continent again and be like, oh no,
right.
I
And think it's like about her. Yeah. And so, and she's like, well, maybe I want to go off to the continent with you. Like, you didn't even, what do you think about that kind of a thing? And he's like,
he's like, I would love it.
yeah. And
Come with.
so they are, and he's like, could you live with being a duchess, being my duchess? Like, can you live with the possible blowback from the crown if I do deny this request to go back into service? Like, and, um, you know, is it one or the other? Like, can we have everything? Like, the list goes on of all the things that she has to like contemplate as to what she's willing to live with, basically. And, she agrees that she loves him and she does want to be with him, and they make up, and it's very sweet, and that's excuse me, the end. And we get the epilogue, which is
Mhm.
2 years later at the cottage, her cottage.
They
Dorian,
were using the cottage. I mean, and I think during their like negotiations of getting back together, it was a thing where she was like, I would like to have this cottage as like a place that I can like get away from all this hoopla.
right,
And so
all the duchy of it all. Yeah.
it's fun that we get to meet them like in that cottage where they're
Yes.
being.
And so Dorian ultimately did accept the crown's request, and Caro traveled with him to the continent. And after a little more than a year, they realized that she was pregnant and they decided to come home. And of course, the war was winding down at that point anyway, so it was okay.
Yeah, and nobody wanted some pregnant lady out of
Right.
the
Especially not
battlefield.
pregnant with a heir to a duchy that doesn't currently have an heir. Very important work she's doing there. So, his mom also came around eventually because, of course, Caroline is fucking amazing. And as I think Gerard said to him one time, like, anybody who doesn't think she's good enough, like, either doesn't know her or is stupid. Like, that's pretty much like what he said,
The
which,
thing that's interesting is that there is a moment in this book, and now I can't remember like how far in it is, but
mhm.
there's a moment in this book where he says something in the presence of both his mother and Caro, and they have like a
They say
unanimous
the same thing at the same time.
synchronized reaction, and they're
What
both like,
rot?
oh,
I remember they
yeah,
say what rot, but I can't remember
mhm,
what it was about.
yeah. So it's like they have a lot in common. They just need
Yeah.
like his mom just needs to like ease in because she,
Unclench.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's better.
So, they are tomorrow they're heading back to London until after the baby's born. So this is kind of like their last little like private time. And also there's a little thing in there about Sherman and Timothy both perishing in a freak accident at a brewery. There was an explosion and they drowned in beer, and also excuse me. Sherman got impaled by like the wood from the barrel. I don't know. It was very, very satisfying. I'm not gonna lie.
Also, like, hilarious how much of a, like a little asterisk, like, "And by the way,"
And they're dead. Yay. Um,
terrible, terrible accident.
it was funny. And so her cousins have sent her the newspaper article about it happening and wrote in the margins, I didn't do it. And then her other cousin was like, I also didn't do it. And so yeah, that was really
Uh,
funny. And so they had they're like laying in bed, like they just had like had sex, and so she walks naked into the kitchen to like get some food, and like this whole like life that they're living is like everything he ever wanted basically, and it's all amazing. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
yeah, it ends on this note where it's like, tomorrow we're gonna go back and there's gonna be servants and it's gonna be like we're gonna be the Duke and the Duchess and whatever. But like
Yeah.
here in this place, like we can just be ourselves. And I
Right,
thought
like
that was
she's
a
in the
really
kitchen
sweet way
making
to
her
end.
own plate, like a duchess doesn't do that. You know what I mean? Like when they're at home,
Yeah,
they're not going to be doing that. So like this is their like, yeah, it was really
it was
sweet.
really sweet.
So that is it, everybody. We hope you liked it as much as we did. Next week we will be talking to the author Bethany Bennett about her book and other things about what's going on with her. So that'll be
That's
exciting.
gonna be fun.
Yes, so you can find that next week over on YouTube as well.
See you then.
Thank you, everybody. See you next month.